Okay, it's the end of the session. I am here without Simon, but he might come and join us in a little bit. This is basically Simon, Abby, and Oreo's roadmap to success. Now, one of the things that Guardians really want to work on is Abby and Oreo pull on the leash tremendously. And the Guardians wanted to work on that, and we think that's important, but at the same time, Abby and Oreo's confidence level is so low. I'm really more concerned about their building up their confidence than we are on training. So we really focused on that in this session. But I do want to offer a couple of tips that will help on walks. So the first thing is the dogs here are using a harness as opposed to a collar. For stressed out dogs, a collar can actually activate and cause them more stress and anxiety. So using a harness is great. Problem with a harness is harnesses make it easier for the dogs to pull, especially if the attachment is right here. Dogs have something called an opposition reflex. They are programmed to pull against us. So every time we pull on the leash, they have no choice but to pull against us. We take it personally and we pull them back, and we have this tug of war. And really all we're doing is helping our dog practice pulling. So one of the things I recommend the Guardians do is get a front clip harness that clips about right here. So the leash is going here. It requires a little bit more leash management, but now instead of activating the opposition reflex when I pull and you pull back, that's part of the reason why they pull so much. So they pull now, it's going to pull me a little bit to the side. And so instead of directly pulling against us is what kind of helped turn them a little bit. Now it's not going to stop them from pulling a leash, but it will help stop making it worse, the pulling worse. That harness switch would be really important. Message me if you can't find the harness that I was talking about. I'd like to have a harness that's secure so they can't get out, especially for fearful dogs, because they're not going to go up to people if they get out. So we want to make sure it's secure. And a lot of times the way they get out is they wiggle away from you. So if you're standing where the camera is and I'm the dog and I'm backing away wiggling, that's how the harness can flip off. So if that's ever the case, relax or kind of go to the side and offer treats or whatever it is. And remember, if your dog's reactive, the very best thing you do is increase the distance between them and whatever they're reactive to. Now, I like using clickers. I didn't use a clicker here for this because the dogs are kind of nervous. We really didn't work with the dogs other than Simon directly. So what I would do, though, is use a little operant conditioning. So come up with a command word. You can call it look, attention, eyes, focus, whatever you want to say. Let's say we're going to say the word eyes. I'd like the Guardians, right now the Guardians are walking them 2 or 3 dogs together. 2 of them pull a lot. And if you have a dog that comes up to you off leash that's escaped and runs up to you, you have nowhere to go. If you have 2 dogs, you have 3, you're just SOL. And so there might be a fight going on. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. And so I would really prefer to see the Guardians walking the dogs 1 at a time. I know it's not as convenient, and I'm going to go over some creative forms of exercise here in a minute. That's going to be a lot more beneficial because it gives you the ability to move the dog away, give it your full attention, and have an extra arm if you do need to hold another dog in bay. All right, so for the eyes exercise, what I would like you to do is have a whole bunch of treats. You might want to get a training treat pouch like this so you can clip onto your shorts or leggings or whatever it is. Get some high-value training treats. These need to be treats that have a strong aroma that the dog really likes. What I'm going to do then, I'm going to go for the walk. Now, we want to walk when there are no other dogs around. So one of the things I talk to the Guardians about is, like right when kids are coming home from school, that's a horrible time to walk the dogs. When people are coming home from work, horrible time to walk the dogs because they're going to see a lot of people and they don't want to see people. So in that case, you might want to practice this, or if you have to walk the dogs at those times, go to a park. We're going to find a big open field so you can manage your distance. If another dog is approaching to you, you can walk away. And like I said, distance is really important. So what you want to do is you're walking along, you have a treat in your hand, but you don't let the dog know you have a treat, and you're just waiting. So let's say that I am the handler and I'm right up here, and since I'm wearing the quest face, I'm going to be the dog. So the handler is up here. So I'm kind of booping around, I'm sniffing. We're going to let the dog sniff as much as it wants to on walks, because that's calming. It burns more energy than the walk and the whole 9 yards. But the human's face is here. So I'm kind of boop, boop, boop every once in a while. Eyes! And then a treat comes down and I get a treat. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait for the dog to voluntarily look at you in the face. And when it does, you're going to sign the word eyes, attention, focus, whatever you want to say. So we're not cueing it, we're waiting for the dog to do it, and then we're just recognizing and then rewarding them for doing it. At first it'll be accidental. After a while, it'll start becoming intentional. And once that's the case, then you want to be able to say attention or eyes, the dog looks up, and then it comes and gets a treat. Remember, the order is the word needs to precede the action, and the action should be followed by a reward, a treat, or attention. So if I want to teach the dog to sit, I'm going to motion the dog into a sit. You can't see him right here, but Simon's right here. So I motion him to sit. Well, let's give it a treat when we do that. even though they won't see you, we'll do the real deal. So he sees I have a treat. I'm going to lure by raising his head. He sits. I say sit, and then I pop the treat in his mouth. So you're going to try to lure the dog into the position right before the butt hits the ground. You say sit, then you pop the treat in the dog's mouth, and then or excuse me, you want to, as the dog's about to say sit, you say sit, then the butt hits the ground, then you pop the treat in their mouth. So basically, that means if I hear this command word and I do this command action, I get a command reward. And so it becomes a contract, and that makes it easier for you to elicit a response from the dog. So at first when you're doing this, there's no dogs around, there's no people around, there's no lawnmowers, there's nothing the dog doesn't like. You're just walking, and every time the dog looks at you, you're giving that treat. Now, like I said, at first it'll be accidental, after a while it'll become more intentional. So then, let's say that you've established that you're walking down the street, and again, we only have one dog, and we come around a corner and see there's another dog in the front yard. And we know my dog's going to bark as soon as I see that. So maybe I see it before the dog does. I can say, eyes, looks up at me, and I give it a treat, and I kind of turn and walk the other direction. Now, that allows us to get the dog out of position before. Now, once the dog is reacting, it's not going to listen to you. There's no magic trick. Sometimes you'll have to pull the dog away. That really means that we didn't do a good job managing the situation. The best thing we can do is manage. So when you're walking, you see, okay, I know this house always has a dog in the backyard. I might cross the street, so when I cross that street, cross in front of that house, I have more distance. That's going to help the dog feel more comfortable. There's another dog where I don't have the ability to do that across the street for whatever reason. I might jog past that particular house, or I might pick up a different route. And that's why, like I said, I like doing the park walks, because you can just moderate and make sure that you're maintaining and making sure there's no dogs that are going to be a trigger. So your dog not practicing reacting. Your dog is practicing everything it does, either practicing good behavior or bad behavior. So we want to help them practice good behaviors like looking up at me gets me a reward. Now, something else you might want to do is also practice and build in a U-turn. So I use the word turn for this. What I do is I'm walking. Every once in a while, I turn. Now, let's say that I want to, I have the dog on this side. I want to turn away from the dog if I only have one dog. So as I'm walking and there's nobody around, there's no reason for the dog to be startled or spooked or distracted. As I'm walking, these are my feet. I'm going to take the first step. On my turn, I'm going to do a T. So I'm kind of crossing in front, and I have a treat in this hand. So the dog's here. I start turning this way. So I take the first step like this, second step here. Now both my feet are parallel or perpendicular to the orientation I was originally going. Now my feet are going this way. And then I say the dog's name. The dog turns its head. As soon as it turns its head, I'm holding a treat in this hand. So I'm turning, and the dog is still going here, but I'm turning, and I say the dog's name. It sees me, and then it turns. And then when we're both facing the other direction, I would say turn, or whatever the word is, whatever you want to say, turn, and then pop the treat in the dog's mouth. Then I would walk about 5 to 10 paces that way and repeat it, and then eventually go this way. So you're doing a U-turn, going back the other way, doing another U-turn, and then continuing on the original point of line or direction that you were going. So the dog's like, okay, my humans are weird. Blue shirt man comes, and now every once in a while they're walking me, they just do a circle for no reason. We're doing it for a reason because, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the session, we want to teach our dogs how to do something. We want to teach them how to do it in the easiest version possible. For some reason, it comes to dogs, we decide, let's teach it in the most difficult reason possible. Let's wait for the dog to be reactive and try to teach it to be quiet. Never going to get a response. So if you want to teach your dog to do something, you teach it in the easiest version possible and build up the response and the confidence and the association. Then you can start using it later on. So as you're walking, you see another dog, and your dog sees as well. You say turn, the dog turns with you, expecting to get that treat. Now you're walking away and you've increased the distance. So those are a couple of little tricks that will help. Now what I'd really like to do is I'd like to have the guardians, I think we're going to need these dogs to get on some, I think the dogs need to be on some meds. And I'd like to have them have a couple weeks to work on that. I'd like to have a couple sessions with Laura to build up their confidence. But eventually I'd like to have Dominique come, and she can teach you how to do a leash pressure game, some tricks to get the dog to walk next to you in a heel. And even if the dogs are reactive, Dominique can kind of coach you up from a distance, or maybe just work with Simon and show you how to do that. So I don't want to say that don't want to do that, but the healing on the walk is nowhere near as important as building up their confidence, because they're both fearful and both of them showed reactivity that were unpredictable. And the wrong situation, they bite the wrong person, that might get them euthanized. So I'd much rather we focus on that and focus on the inside exercise we're going to talk about right now. So the forms of exercise we talked about inside, make sure you talk to your vet about this. If they show any limping or any signs of distress, stop and talk to your vet, but you should probably talk to your vet before you start this. Also make sure you do this in an empty stomach. Remember, dogs have a distended stomach, so if you exercise them with food in their stomach, that can actually flip the stomach over. That can actually be fatal. So 90 minutes after eating before we exercise them. So the first thing we talked about was the doggy stairmaster. You should go to the top of the stairs. We should exercise all the dogs separately for this. So show the dog you have a treat, throw the treat at the bottom of the stairs. The dog runs down the stairs to look it up. When they get to the one step away, say Hawaii or Jamaica or whatever your word is to go to the bottom of the stairs. Make sure it's a funny word. I'm thinking that the guardians here are a little bit stressed because of the dog's behavior. And that creates a tension. And that can absolutely be felt and impact the dog's behavior. So what we want to do instead is we want to come up with some funny command words. So if you use silly command words and it makes you and your family members chuckle, that kind of breaks the tension. And that might help the dog feel a little bit more relaxed. So basically, let's say we call it Fiji. So I throw the treat at the bottom of the stairs, the dog runs down the bottom of the stairs. Right before it licks it up, I say Fiji, then it licks up the treat. Remember, command word, action, reward at the end. And then now he got the treat, he's happy. I show Simon I got another treat. He runs to the top of the stairs, and right before he gets to the last step, I say Canada, then I pop the treat in his mouth. And that is one repetition. Keep doing that the first time with an empty stomach until Simon's like, you're crazy, or yeah, I've done it 83 times, I'm not doing it anymore. Now we know the maximum number. And it's going to be a different number for each dog. We don't exercise the dog at our 100%. We're going to exercise them somewhere between 25 to 75%. So I talked to the guardians about keeping an exercise journal. Write down the new page for each dog. Write down the name of each dog. Make 3 columns, and then on the left side or on the right side, put the time. So write down what time you feed them, what time you exercise them, what type of exercise, how many repetitions, how long the walk was, how many duration probably for walks. Scent games, how many treats they found or how long they did the scent games or whatever it is. Number of fetches and so on. So the idea is to, and also write down anytime you catch them sleeping, when you feed them, anything noteworthy, there's a barking incident, whatever it is. So you start writing this stuff down, and then you give each dog a letter grade, A through F at the end of the day. And then the next day you start a new sheet and start it all over again. Now remember, different days of the week are going to have different rhythms and patterns outside. Warm weather days versus cold weather days, you might have more stimulus outside and all that. So take those things into consideration. I'd like you to keep that for about 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you start looking back and flipping back and comparing a Saturday to a Saturday and see, well, when we fetch the dog, 25 fetches twice a day, we had a B+ day. We fetch the dog 3 times with 33 fetches each time. That was an A- day. So the idea is to play around with those elements. Remember, it's going to be different amount of exercise for each dog. And I think for these dogs, exercise is going to be a huge component. I think there's a lot of frustration for these dogs. And walking, I don't think, is the best behavior for them if there's going to be other dogs around. They're going to be practicing doing things we don't want. So the doggy stairmaster is a nice thing we do inside. The guardians like to play fetch inside. Another great way to exercise them. I also recommend you Google scent games, SCENT. It's hiding treats around. Again, the dog should be doing this stuff separately. And then there's all sorts of, then I'd like you to get an Omega Paw treat ball or a couple of them, so you can feed the dogs snacks in those in different rooms. And the dogs need to practice being in other rooms. Right now, they're all together all the time. So if one person leaves with one dog, they start freaking out. We need to help them start to practice being alone and feeding them in separate rooms or with an Omega Paw treat ball or take them in a different room and give them a bully stick or whatever is a nice way to get them kind of distracted and they practice being calm while they're alone. So let me see. So look for, you can look for DIY enrichment is what we call it for dogs, or DIY dog games, DIY dog puzzles, things like that. You can also, I very much like the guardians to go to get a snuffle mat for each dog. If you just search for snuffle mat on Amazon, the gray one I showed you in the video will be the very first one on Amazon. That's my preferred one to use. So right now the dogs are free fed, which means there's food in the bowl all the time. Dogs spend 90% of their time eating, so leaving food in the bowl kind of robs them of motivation of something to do. Also, it can create a resource that some dogs can get in a fight, and I've had 100+ clients, nope, you're wrong, they're fine. And then I hear back from them 6 months, 2 months, 2 weeks later, the dogs are starting to fight over the food. You got enough problems. These dogs do not, they're all rescue dogs. They don't need any additional problems. And so, although they're fine with that, that can change. And also, providing them with structure for feeding can help boost their confidence in you guys and reduce their anxiety. If the dog knows what's coming, that's comforting for them. Just like me petting you under your chin, huh, Simon? Okay, so basically when you're feeding them, feed them in different areas using those snuffle mats. And I would like to feed at least twice a day. 3 times a day would be ideal. But twice a day is fine if that's okay as well. But that makes the snuffle mat almost like feeding them 2 or 3 times a day of snuffle mat. That's almost like an extra walk that you build in. I'd also like the exercise to be done multiple times a day, about every 2 to 4 hours. And if you have a Zoom call, take them out and do the doggy stairmaster first. give them that 10 minutes, and they always need 10 minutes to rest afterwards. Then grab the next, or take one dog, doggy Stairmaster, put it somewhere, then grab the next dog, doggy Stairmaster, and next dog. So then when you sit down for your Zoom call, the dogs are all tired and they're recovering or they're sleeping, and then you get to do your call without getting interrupted. Let me see. So those are forms of exercise. Something else you might want to consider for the dogs is get a doggy backpack. It's a harness that has pockets on either side that you can fill it up with bottles of water or weights of sand or whatever it is. It makes the walk more efficient because they're carrying something. It also helps because it gives the dogs something to do. A lot of dogs, if you put on a certain harness, some service dogs go into work mode when that's the case. So that might help them. I'd bark at you right now, but I'm carrying the water, literally. So that's a nice way to make the walks more efficient. So I want you to keep that exercise journal for 2 to 3 weeks and play around with those elements until you find the right amount of exercise for for each dog, also for each activity. Remember, before a walk, we might exercise the dogs before the walk. Maybe before the walk, Simon here needs 10 up downs on the stairs. Oreo needs 23, and Abby needs 30. Or whatever it is, we give them that time to recover, then we take them for a walk. We're gonna have a much better walk because we took off that top level of energy. Also, before guest comes over, there's a certain amount of exercise they might need for that. So the idea with the exercise journal is to play around for each dog until we find that right combination. And so we see on the exercise journal, somebody came over, there was a workman next door, or whatever it is, and I exercised this much, and the dog's response was this. We want to come up with something that's reasonable for the guardians to achieve and work into their schedule that also has the biggest impact on the dogs. And I think, like I said, for these dogs, it's going to be huge. We also talked about drugs, and I would like the guardians here to, I'm going to send them an email. We like using Insight. They're veterinary behaviorists that do teleconsulting. And so it's about $200 to do a session, but I think that Abby and Oreo both would greatly benefit from drugs. Now, from medication, I should say, not just drugs. But basically, I noticed for Abby, 10 feet was her distance. If she was within 10 feet of us, she was staring, her tail was down, she was stiff, she was uncomfortable. She got to 10 feet or more, her tail came out, her body relaxed, she exhaled, did some yawning, she felt a lot more comfortable. Well, with drugs, we might be able to, medication, we might be able to go from 10 feet and collapse it down to 5 feet. So, and those are things that are going to take a couple of weeks to take effect. So I'd like you to try to set that up, and I'd love to have the dogs, about 3 or 4 weeks in before we have Laura come back and start working with them. So the drugs can help the dogs feel a little bit less jittery. There's a ton of cortisol in both Oreo and Addie's blood. And a lot of times when we have dogs like that, they can develop PTSD. And so a lot of times what we do, we have to take them out of the environment that's causing them stress, put them in a stress-free environment. Sometimes it takes 3 days in a stress-free environment for that cortisol to get out of their blood. There's no way that's going to happen because these dogs cascade. If one dog barks, the next dog barks. That's why the videos above will be really helpful in counter conditioning for sounds and all the rest of that stuff. But the drugs will accelerate the process. It's a little bit more expensive to begin with, but it really will help you in the long run. Now, we also talked about rules and structure. A lot of us perceive rules as negative, and a little bit of dog psychology. Some highlights. Anything a dog is doing when you pet it, what you're specifically rewarding. So if you come home and your dog jumps up on you, you pet it when it's jumping up on you, you're saying jumping up on me is the best way to ask for attention because I'm petting you when you do it. This works for good things and for bad things. Also, good attention and bad attention from you is pretty much the same thing. And for dogs, anything a dog does in your presence that you don't specifically disagree with, you're saying that as my seal of approval. So in a very real way to dogs, not saying no is similar to saying yes. It's important to understand with dogs because dogs go through life probing, waiting for somebody to say no when I get to the limit. And then I'm going to circle back around and try again. If you're consistent enough times in a row, the dog's like, oh, that's a boundary I shouldn't cross. If we don't have any rules, we can't be consistent, we can't be repeating things on a regular basis, and we can't have good timing. And so all the 3 factors that dogs learn by are really invalidated. So it's important that we understand that and have some rules and structures so the dogs start to see us acting like a leader through our actions. And for dogs, the more they see us act like a leader, the more confidence they're going to have in us. So some of the rules I suggested would not be allowing the dogs to be near another dog when it has a bone or a high-value item or eating. Throwing and using the video above on teaching the dog goes to the dog bed at that time would be helpful for that. Not being allowed around the humans when they're eating food. Not being allowed in the kitchen when the humans are preparing food. The rest of the time they can come and go, but not when we're eating or doing whatever it is. Additionally, God, there was another one I wanted to go over. Premax at the door. So premax means a less desirable behavior will earn me a more desirable behavior. So you go to the door, the dog scratches the door, and you open the door and let it out. So you're telling the dog scratching at the door is a way to ask me to go outside. Now, I'd like the dogs to actually know what the command word is to potty, so when they come up, we can actually query them. So we'll go outside with them when they're about to potty. When one of the dogs starts to bend down or assume the potty position, say a new word like business or splat or plot, whatever it is. I'm going to say business. So as soon as the dog starts to say potty, I say business in a normal tone of voice. I quietly pull out a treat without distracting the dog. When the dog gets done, I crouch down, and that'll attract the dog's attention. Hold out, say business again, and then pop the treat in their mouth. So now, if the dog comes up and nudging you upstairs and you don't know whether or not it just wants attention or wants to go outside, you say potty or business, the dog goes like this, then you know that's a yes. You say business, the dog keeps on pawing at you saying, I want something else. So it's nice to have those things. That way we don't have to get up to let the dog outside when it doesn't need to go outside. So for the premac, we go to the door, and we can use premax for getting on the furniture, getting through a door, before I prepare the food, before I attach the leash, and so on. So let's do it for the door. The dog right now scratches the door, the humans open the door, that's conditioning them to scratch the door to ask to go out. This is how to teach the dog to sit at the door. So we go to the door, we tell the dog to sit after it's scratched one time, after we tell it to sit one time. If it doesn't sit within 2 seconds, I walk away and I sit down. When you stand, you look like you're temporary, or you're going to be there temporarily. When you sit down, you're going to be there for a while. So sit down at the kitchen table, pull out a magazine, read it for 1 minute. After that, go back to the door and say sit again. Let's say this time Oreo sits and the other two dogs don't sit. I would open the door and let Oreo out. I'm going to pay the dogs based on performance. The other two dogs don't get the privilege because they didn't sit down. Then I sit down myself and I read this time for 2 minutes. Next time I sit down for 4 minutes, and then for 8 minutes. I'm only asking one time. The dog has 2 seconds to comply, and if they don't, I'm on to the next thing. Eventually, the dog sits down when you tell it, and then the door opens, and that becomes the reward. Do it with both directions of the door. You can do it before you start preparing. Tell them to sit. They sit, and then you start preparing the food. They get up, stop the process, tell them to sit again. I'm only going to prepare this food if you're sitting. So also for attaching the leash and all the other things I talked about. So the more that you incorporate rules and structure, the more the dogs kind of feel a little bit more confident, and also they're doing things to please, I would say to please you, to earn privileges. And like sitting to ask to go outside the door, that's a polite way of doing it, and that helps with that leader-follower dynamic I talked about. We also talked about petting with a purpose and passive training. Petting with a purpose is, and these are both ways to add structure. So petting with a purpose is if you want to pet the dog, or the dog wants you to pet it. The dog comes up and nudges you, you tell it to sit. Or the dog wants to get on your lap and paws you, tell it to sit. If it's already sitting here, tell it to sit here or here or here. Or tell it to lie down. Don't tell it to shake. If it complies within 2 seconds, then I invite the dog in my lap, or pet it, or whatever it was that the dog wants. If it doesn't sit, remember, playing hard to get works great for dog training. So if it doesn't sit, you're on to the next thing. There's no punishment, there's no yelling at the dog, but the dog doesn't get what it wants. After a while, the dog will recognize this. I can't tell the humans what to do anymore. I have to ask, and better than ask, I have to pay for their attention. The dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay for the attention. When they do, you bet your butt you better pet them, otherwise it's going to go back to nudging you or whatever it is. If they do it and you pet them a minute and then they do it again, they're probably saying I need some exercise, take them out and get some exercise. Remember, exercise every 2 to 4 hours. That is a huge thing for you guys, so please put a huge emphasis on that, because I think if you come up with the right amount of exercise, a lot of your other problems are going to not necessarily be disappeared, but are going to be greatly diminished, and fixing them is going to be a lot easier. So basically, after a while, the dog will sit to prepay for the attention. Make sure you pet for that. Use the watchword of paycheck. Paycheck is not a busted. Paycheck means I suspect you may have forgotten to pet with purpose. So if somebody comes in, I'm petting Simon, and then somebody says, because they see him, he is standing, they say, paycheck, I stop petting even if I did it right. Tell him to sit. When he sits, remember, pet under the chin, never pet up here. Really, this is a great area to pet, but I prefer to pet under the chin if all things are equal, because that creates nose up, and that's a confident dog body mechanic. So I say sit, he sits, I pet him on his chin. Or actually, somebody comes in and they say paycheck, I stop petting. I tell him to sit, he sits, I pet under his chin. And then I say, actually, I asked the dog to sit, and you missed it. But thanks for reminding me, because I do forget to pet without a purpose. It's just for humans. It's not to chastise the dog. If you get in a habit of doing that, remember, it'll increase the dog's respect for you. It'll boost the dog's confidence. It'll help the dog practice basic obedience, and it will make your pets more valuable. That makes the dog more likely to do it the next time. We also talked about celebrating, which is passive training, which is really rewarding the dog when it does things that you want, when the dog does it on its own accord without any influence from me. So if Simon's walking towards me when he's a foot away, I would say, come, and then reach down and pet him under his chin. If he's about to sit down, I say sit right before the butt hits the ground and then pet him. If he's about to lay down, I say crash or whatever the word is. You're about to go to the dog bed, I say Hawaii right before he gets there. Name all your individual toy. Call it Gator, pumpkin, all the rest of this stuff. When my dogs eat, they all have a command word. This dog, right now, his name, or that I'm wearing, his name is Quest, and his command word to eat is feast. The way I assign that is when I would come over when he's a puppy, I'd tap the bowl and say, Quest, and he'd come over right before he'd start taking his first bite, I'd say feast, and then he started eating. So now feast is the command word to eat. So I do that for eating and for drinking. I would name all your individual toys, do it for potty training, do it for eyes on the walks like we talked about. Mark the words to go up and down the stairs for the doggy stairmaster. So after a while, you're going to have a better vocabulary with the dogs. That will also reduce their stress because they know how to communicate what they want from you. Doesn't mean you're always going to give them what they want. We want to as long as it's safe to do so. But now the dogs know how to ask us, and also the mechanism that they need to achieve that. I come and sit to get petted. I would also do a pre-mac of getting up on the couch. So the dog comes and sits there or wants to be on your lap, tell it to sit or sit over here or lay down, and then it gets the reward. If it doesn't, remember, playing hard to get works great for dog training. For passive training, what we're doing is celebrating the things the dog does that we like. So if I see that the dog walked up to somebody else in the house and they missed it, I say, celebrate! That person should stop what they're doing and immediately start petting the dog. Remember, you only have 2 seconds. If I saw it happen, that was second number 1, and then I say celebrate, that's second number 2. You got to start petting your dog immediately. And then you pet your dog a little bit, and then after a while, you'll get in a habit and you'll start watching your dog. The more you pet your dog for desired behaviors, the more they will offer those behaviors to get your attention. And these dogs, especially Abby and Oreo, the more that they know how to get the things they want, that's going to give them a lot more confidence. That's going to reduce a lot of the anxiety. And that's going to be very profound with both those dogs. So please don't disregard it. All of the methods that I've described here are pretty easy. None of them are very difficult. The reason they are so effective is because they are based on your lifestyle. You're going to be doing these things every day, multiple times a day. Petting with a purpose once isn't going to do anything. Petting with a purpose, everybody in the house all the time. Now the dog starts to sit to prepay for that attention. That becomes very big and impactful. Also, don't forget, exercising your dogs before the walk. That's one of the things I probably should have said at the beginning of this video. I'm about to wrap it up. But if you figure out before the walk, each dog needs this amount of exercise on the doggy stairmaster or fetch or whatever it is, then I let them recover, then take them for a walk, you're going to find you have a much better response. The last little tip for the walk, I guess we started it, we'll end it. I would have a treat pouch like I mentioned to you before, like one of these things, and have some high-value training treats. When you're walking along and your dog gets done sniffing and its nose is up and it's not really distracted by anything, ask it for a sit. When it sits, if it sits, pop the treat in its mouth and then walk a little bit more. Start asking your dog to sit and lie down, but don't compete with its nose. If its nose is on the ground, it's not going to listen to you. It's going to practice ignoring you. And don't ever try to compete with it when it's sniffing things. We want it to sniff things. That's, like I said, it burns more energy and it builds confidence. But if you start conditioning your dog to listen to you, that you have a bunch of treats on walks, you might give them to me. We exercise them ahead of time, and then we reward the eyes, and then the dog, at first it'll be difficult to get them to sit, but as you do it, they'll start sitting faster and faster. I have one client that in between every driveway, he asks the dog to sit or lie down or do a circle. And now the dog just like, we get to the next driveway, the dog's already doing a circle before you get there. So it's a nice way for the dog to start, again, building up some confidence and knowing what it can do to achieve things. Sit. So I said it one time, and Simon's now holding up his paw for me. That's not what I want. So if I keep on saying the command word, like I said, I'm going to help him practice not listening to me. Sit. There you go, he sat. That's Simon. You can't see him, but I'm David, and this is Quest's face. And this is Simon, Abby, and Oreo's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.